there will be some changes as people recalibrate how they use their office. But the initial, bad news from the media that the office is dead hasn't come to pass, and I don't think will.
Welcome everybody to our professional series. This is episode 3. I'm delighted to be joined by Jake McKinnon of Cushman Wakefield. Welcome, Jake.
Thank you very much.
Jake's been with Cushman's for nearly 5 years, spent a couple of years with Knight Frank prior to that, has done a degree down at Griffith University in environmental planning, and we're really pleased to have him here today. Before we get into the nitty-gritties, Jake, of what's happening in the property market at the moment, and also what's going to be happening in the future, and your thoughts on that, let's run through our fast 5 questions for you, and I'll mix them up. Best dish in the kitchen for you when you're tossing up for your friends?
Mexican or anything out of the smoker for me.
Great. Favourite place to holiday?
Far North Coast, New South Wales.
Byron Bay area?
Background home.
Oh, home from there. Okay, great. Favourite sporting team?
Australian cricket team.
Right. Favourite player?
Usman Khawaja.
Ken Bat, yep. And were you a batsman or?
No, I was a bowler actually.
Okay.
Yep.
Medium, fast?
Fast before the back blew.
Okay, sure. And best advice you've ever received across your life?
Across my life, I will still go back to the Pizza Hut ad. Work hard, be good to your mother.
Yep. Smart answer. And crypto, are you a yes or a no man?
Not at present.
Okay. Would have liked to be in the last 6 months.
Definitely.
Great, thanks. Mate, okay, let's talk a little bit about how you've got to where you've got to today. So you're the National Research Manager with Cushman Wakefield. You've clearly been in that area for quite a while now. Just tell us a little bit about how you've got to that position.
Well, straight out of uni, started in consulting, property consulting, worked across a range of sectors, resi, office, industrial, childcare, fuel, most of the alternates. Love the property market, sort of drifted away from planning a little bit to that consulting side like that. Then sort of went across to Knight Frank, more specifically in the aged care, health, retirement, medical market. Royal Commission into aged care sort of stopped that market in its tracks for a little bit, so I had to pivot and moved across sort of back into that research consulting sphere at Cushman, where I've been there for almost 5 years now.
And so you've moved through the ranks there, have you? What did you start with?
Started as an analyst or a senior analyst there a few years ago. Sort of worked up to Queensland Queensland State Manager for research. Then we pivoted and split out no state managers and just worked into sort of national roles now. So now sitting as national manager. And
so what does that involve for you day to day?
So looking after the team, the analysts, all the admin that goes with that. I've sort of had the industrial market taken off my hands a little bit. We've put on a new head of industrial research, Luke Crawford, down in Sydney. So that's sort of given me a bit more time to focus sort of through purely on the office sector and the alternates.
Okay, great. And you've got a team under you, mate?
I do, yep.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So let's get into a little more of the nitty-gritty and I think that things that our viewers will be quite interested in. And that's about, what's happening in the market now. So if you don't mind, I'll just throw a couple of questions at you. I'll let you tell us your thoughts and based on what you do in your role each day. The RBA at some point in time are going to cut rates, and I'll ask you that question. You'll have a view in-house at Kushman. Yep. So what's the sentiment in Kushman?
Our house view is Q4 this year. First rate cut, early-ish Q4, and then potentially another one before the end of Q1 2025.
Right, and what about in 2025? What's the view there?
Well,
not that far ahead yet?
We have to a degree, but potentially 2 cuts.
Okay. So
again, that could change.
4% over the next 18 months-ish?
Potentially.
Okay. So if you think about those cuts coming in place, where do you see the yields firming? In which sectors do you think they'll firm more quickly than others?
Look, I think it's going to have to go through a few steps to get to the yield firming. We'll sort of see that first pivot from the RBA. Once that happens, market confidence will come back a little bit. Transaction volumes will pick up. Once that transaction volume picks up, the pricing starts resetting. There may be a little yield movement initially through that, but then pushing, you're sort of looking at, I think, late 25, early 2026 to the yields start firming. Some of the sectors might go a little bit differently. You generally don't see anything counter-cyclical. They will all go the same way. It's just that timing. The build-to-rent market, some of the retail market, they've already gone through. They're further through the cycle, I should say. So I think they may go a touch earlier. Industrial has obviously just been a pillar of strength across the last few years. So that there's massive growth potential there as well. I think the office market's probably the one with the most challenges and may lag just slightly. But again, late 2025, early 2026.
Okay. And so in terms of a buyer's market now, how do you feel about the opportunities that are out there now? We know there's been less transactions over the last, say, 18 months specifically, but what's your view of the market now from a buying sense?
Oh, look, from a buying sense, it's good and bad. It's asset specific, it's location specific. Like, you can't just blanket say it's good buying in the office sector or the retail sector. It's very much nuanced. So you've got to obviously pick your things. The office sector locally in Brisbane, like our market's doing really well. Like, incredible rent growth, vacancies driving down, absorption's up, which is counter to the rest of I think we had negative 200,000 square metres of office absorption across the country. Since December 2019, put that in comparison to the US, was about 10 million. But Brisbane, on the other hand, is positive. So the market's sort of moving a little bit differently to, say, our southern counterparts. So I think, especially in Brisbane, there's some pretty good opportunities. It's sort of, if you can find things that are below or at about market rent, because the yields are across the whole market softening, and that's sort of a byproduct of global office conditions as well. So
just quickly on Brisbane, while we talk about Brisbane and South East Queensland, do you see this golden era of the Olympics that many other cities have had? Is that something is that the reason Brisbane's held up better, or is it because it was undervalued, or what's your view of that?
Look, I just think it was where Brisbane sat within the property cycle. We always lagged Sydney and Melbourne. Part of it was our supply pipeline. Melbourne delivered 500,000 square metres of supply through COVID, or just at the start of COVID. Brisbane just didn't have that supply pipeline pressure happening. So it's sort of everything in the pipeline got delayed, some things got canned. So we don't have that pressure building on that. So instantly, our vacancies coming down, especially with that positive absorption. So that pushes the rent up, incentives tighten. So the market's performing pretty well. Whereas Melbourne, a lot of stock came on, and that obviously plays a part of sort of the way it went.
Great. Jake, we've talked a little bit about traditional sectors now, office, retail, industrial. What are the emerging sectors in your mind that are going to run a little hotter in the coming years?
I think we've got a range to look at there. The whole alternative sphere is rapidly changing. Build to rent's coming in. There's been strong levels of government support. You've got population driving. You've got national housing crisis with vacancy rates at all-time lows. So that build to rent will definitely gain momentum. It's got really strong institutional interest as well. So I think that's definitely a sector. You have some of the sectors that may not be so much as emerging, but they're sort of emerging into a new sphere, whereas the institutional interest in those sectors is sort of really increasing. Like, through private hospitals, student accommodation, it's continuing to grow. And then, you go through your aged care, your retirement, your land lease communities, all of those are sort of, while they have different income profiles and return profiles to some of the more traditional, they're starting to push through as well. Few challenges within some of those government regulations, and they're a little bit trickier to navigate than the traditional, office or a shed. So, but I think in there are some very strong opportunities. Childcare, government backed, they won't let it fail. It'll continue to grow. We're looking at massive population growth over the next few years, be that through immigration and natural increase. Participation rates in childcare have gone up. Dual working families, increase in the female labour force, that feeds into the office and then into the industrial market, but then also into the childcare market. So there's sort of a few points to that sphere that I think will drive the emerging markets pretty well. While they're still fairly young, if you look at the upside potential following some of the more established markets through the UK and the US, there's solid growth potential across the alternative sector.
Jake, in terms of the states that have this increased population, it's a good thing. However, having appropriate housing is where the problem can lie. Where do you see the increases moving further than state to state, I suppose?
In terms of pure growth, so there's a few components. Queensland, always interstate migration since forever. We're really strong. Victoria was strong leading up to COVID, then dropped right back and went into the negatives. But from that internal sort of movement, Queensland will obviously a massive beneficiary. Immigration, Victoria, I think is 1 in 4 people in Melbourne now, parent born overseas, so it sort of drives into their longer term population growths are really strong, as are Sydney, sort of sitting at that, over that 2.6% for the different cities. But again, Queensland, a lot of that internal movement, which obviously comes with that, jobs, houses, the need for more retail. So off the back of that, I think it puts us in a pretty strong spot here.
Great. Jake, I'll bring you back to the office market in Brisbane again, because in one of our recent acquisitions, we've had really strong rents in the CBD here in Brisbane, a B grade office building. Where do you see the rents now, and where do you more interestingly see the rents going in the Brisbane CD office market?
Brisbane's got pretty good capacity for growth. There's a number of things that drive that growth. Obviously, you've got your flight to quality. We've talked about it for a long time now, but it's still, when you look at the absorption and the take-up, it is in that prime grade and the premium and A-grade properties. That will definitely drive growth there. Lowering vacancy rates, lack of available options. There's many tenants out there that have 5 options in front of them, but really one's suitable. So that's going to continue to drive rents. That should pull incentives down as well. Our forecast for rent growth, there will be just a little bit of a tick up to around that 5.5%, and then it'll smooth slightly down over the longer term, but still sit between that 3 and 5, sort of to 2028, 2029.
Okay, great. So if you look at the rents in Brisbane versus the Sydney, and we know that there's a gap in all of that. How do they really compare? Is it sort of silly money for Sydney compared to Brisbane, or what's your view?
Oh, yeah, there are a few opposing views, obviously, always on that. I think Brisbane provides better value. But then if you look at it, it depends what industry you're in as well. Obviously, Sydney's massively driven by the financial services. So if you're in the financial services, generally Sydney's where you want to be. And that will drive a lot of that growth through industry-specific and asset-specific stuff. The CBD is doing really well in Sydney. So is it value for money? Probably not compared to Brisbane. Is it for Sydney? Probably yes for Sydney. But yeah, when it's not always apples and apples, it's always hard to make a call on that sometimes.
Is there value in Sydney generally in the market at the moment? We looked at a few things in Sydney that we would never have looked at in the past because the yields were too tight. Is there value around more so than there's ever been in the last, say, 15 years?
Oh, look, I think post GFC, there is.
Okay.
We haven't seen some of the sort of vacancy upticks. Parramatta, there's some good opportunity out there. Vacancy is really high at the moment.
They're building their own city almost out there, aren't they?
Yep.
To a degree.
Yeah, okay. It's really running that hub and spoke model. Yep. But Brisbane's probably not large enough, and we're not at a state where we can do that. Sydney's big enough to have those sort of satellite office markets. But again, we've seen a few sales in Sydney where the pricing's resetting at the moment, and that's got further to go. Q1, always traditionally very slow for transactions. I think this year, slow first half, quicker second half. That second half, we'll start to see a lot more transactions happen and that pricing sort of reset happen, and that's where we'll probably see a few more opportunities. People will sort of see that, you're not underselling things or overbuying when that pricing reset happens.
Do you think the banks have put enough pressure on, or not enough, but put pressure on landlords to sell, through this interest rate, spike?
Yes and no.
It seems in some ways they haven't put as much as we thought.
Initially I thought there was going to be a little bit more carnage, so to speak, but there has been some leniency from the banks. But, what we saw through the GFC with vacant office buildings across different countries, a recession's a lot worse than sort of missing a few mortgage payments at this point.
Gotcha. Jake, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about public transport and pedestrian numbers now, because we know they have a direct correlation to how CBDs are performing. Would you mind giving me your view on what's happening on the eastern seaboard in that realm? Yep.
Well, I think we've seen a number of indicators. Like you look at pedestrian counts, you look at public transport numbers. The PCA ran an occupancy thing for the office. All of these things sort of amount to around the same amount. We look at it in terms of pre-COVID numbers and how that sits. Obviously, COVID hit, it dived almost to zero. No one on public transport, no one on the streets, no one driving. We're on lockdowns. Some of our southern states a bit further along than us. It was 120 days in Melbourne. I don't think we went near that. And that sort of shows up in the trends as well. So we've steadily been rising post-COVID. The city centre's reactivating to a degree. So we see it at about 70 to 80% of the pre-COVID numbers, coming back in either by public transport count or by pedestrian count.
That's pretty strong. That's pretty strong.
That is very strong. Obviously the media, there was a lot in the media about the death of office and work from home was going to revolutionise it. While it has, it's not new. It has been around for quite a long time. We obviously saw a take-up rate of work from home that was ridiculous. It almost went to 100% overnight. That's slowly filtering back out. The death of office, I don't think so. The office is still very much needed, very much useful. Again, it can be quite industry specific. There's certain people that need their office space. We've seen people reconfigure their office space quite differently, put more into amenity and breakout areas to encourage your staff back into the office and have a nice working environment rather than sort of cubicles and battery hand style stuff. So while everyone talked about a compression in floor space that people were taking, when you look at the fact that they're putting more amenity in, they might be taking some desks out, but the amenity sort of areas and breakout rooms and such take up more space. So we really didn't see too many massive footprint changes initially. Obviously, you've got leases that will end, and there will be, over the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years, there will be some changes as people recalibrate how they use their office. But the initial, bad news from the media that the office is dead hasn't come to pass, and I don't think will.
No, we haven't seen that either. Even in our seabed asset, it's been really strong, and the rents have been jumping. Could I ask you, in Sydney, in regards to Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, who's performed the best in terms of the numbers coming back in your pedestrian counts?
Melbourne's come back more recently, stronger.
Right.
Which, if you'd been down to Melbourne the last couple of years, the CBD was very, very quiet.
Yep.
I was down there a few weeks ago. It was greatly reactivated on that. But in saying that, in our numbers, Melbourne's the only one that we use pedestrian counts for. Everything else is public transport data for the rest of the states. You can't do it for Victoria because they sort of made a bit of an error a few years ago and released too much public information. So they don't release that data anymore, so we rely on pedestrian counts. So it's not quite apples for apples, but it's consistently that sort of low 70s to 80% for all the states, and very seasonal. January, dives, holidays, Easter, we'll see a dip. Yeah. So that's sort of how we see it.
So Jake, tell us a little bit about the expansion happening at Cushman at the moment.
Well, it's across multi sectors at the moment. We've identified growth, obviously, across a lot of sectors within the property market, and sort of slightly on the outer, still relating to the property market, but more on the advisory side. So we recently put on an advisory plus side, which will work heavily, hopefully, with levels of government and projects from the ground up. We've put on a new alternatives team, which will focus from aged care, retirement, childcare, film studios, agribusiness.
Everywhere from sales and leasing to management, etc.
Valuations, right through there. Yeah, so from sales, leasing, management, then also into valuations, project development services, facility management. There's quite a wide depth of offer at Cushman Wakefield and what we do. I think we're at about 60,000 employees across 60 different countries at the moment.
Wow, that's really impressive. And we're a client of yours, as you know, and we've recently sold an asset in North Queensland through Cushman's, and we're really pleased with the service. So it seems like things are heading in the right direction, of course, with the company.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're well positioned for growth.
Talk to me about technology in property at Cushman. So is it something that the company's focused on? It's a topical matter for us. We're looking at it all the time. Is it a focus at Cushman and Wakefield? And if so, what sort of things are you doing, if you don't mind discussing?
Yeah, no worries. Massive focus globally. Initially being driven out of the US, where a lot of the product development is. We're currently trialling AI here in Brisbane and a couple other locations through Asia Pacific. Help generating reports or basic draft reports, marketing posts, marketing content, stuff like that. We're finding it really good to give you that first draft. And then you come back and fine tune. And the company that we're working with are sort of trying to tailor it to write in our company style. It links into our data and sort of straight feeds data out into reports, into tables. Not quite there yet in Australia, but some of the markets overseas, live rent data that at any point you can just go straight into a report through the AI system. I think it will completely change the industry. We've seen technological advances. The internet, there's been no markets grow like the internet. It was about 29% for a number of years over in the States. It went nuts. AI might not quite go there, but the way it'll change things, I think, definitely has the capacity.
Jake, thanks very much for coming in today. It's been a pleasure having you. We met you through an industry event, and we were very impressed with the way you conducted yourself, the information you shared. So it's a real feather in our cap to have you on. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks everybody for watching today, and we look forward to bringing you our next professional series episode.